to be welcoming our first keynote speaker, attorney April English. She not only serves as an Assistant Attorney General of Massachusetts, but also as the Chief of Organization Development and Inclusion at the Office of Attorney General Maura Healey. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm April English, and I use she, her pronouns. Also, since this could be on social media, my Twitter handle is AC English 97. But I want to thank you all so much for having me at your 6th annual Girl Up Summit. It is indeed an honor and privilege to join all you phenomenal girls and women during Women's History Month, or like I say, her story. I was absolutely thrilled when Kiera reached out to me about being one of the keynote speakers for this awesome event. Kiera worked in our office as a co-op and was, of course, absolutely fantastic, and she is missed for sure. I want to thank Ilanka and Mackenzie for responding to my many emails and assisting me today with the slides and videos. I am truly excited, so excited to be with you all today. And congratulations on all the work you have done, especially around fundraising, education, advocacy, action, and legislative initiatives. So with that, let's get started. To begin, as a fan of poetry, I'd like to start off by sharing one of my favorite poems by one of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou, Phenomenal Woman. Girl up, rise up. Let me share her story and tell you about a young Black girl who grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the youngest of 6 kids to a single mother. She never knew her father and never met her father, and he went to his grave never meeting this young girl who became a woman. She grew up striving to be the best she could be, giving to her community, speaking up for others, and fighting for what she believed was right. As the youngest of 6, the next one up from her was about 12 and a half years older, and her oldest sibling about 20 years older, with the other 4 just a few years younger than the oldest. So a huge gap that created a lot of difference for her in comparison to how her siblings grew up. First and foremost, she shared a room for years with the next one up from her brother, Jeffrey. I'm not sure if that was worse for him or worse for her, but they basically grew up together since all their siblings were that much older than her and even him. It was usually just the 2 of them. Her mother put her through Catholic school from 1st grade to 12th grade, even though they weren't Catholic, but instead Protestant and members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But her mother believed that since her siblings grew up during the era of much racism and discrimination in the Cambridge Public Schools. She wanted better for her youngest daughter, her baby. Not quite sure how much better she thought her daughter's journey would be in an all-white environment where she was typically the only one, and told by her classmates, "Wow, you're my first ever Black friend." And also said with great surprise, "Oh my goodness, you're so smart." As she was journeying through her Catholic school experience, her brother Jeffrey, her best friend at this point, was going through a different journey. Jeffrey was having several repeated interactions with the police, typically for minor motor vehicle violations, and at that time for illegally smoking marijuana. Unfortunately, his school experience had put him on the direct path of the school to prison pipeline, and he was always under the microscope of his teachers, administrators, and eventually the police. She recalled the many phone calls her mom received from her brother asking for bail, as she listened quietly on the other end, unbeknownst to them. She vividly recalled being young and not seeing her brother for about a week, maybe about 3 or 4 days. They were finally in separate rooms at this point, thank God. So as his little sister, she snuck up to his room and he rolled over, but she didn't recognize him. He had been beaten to a pulp by the police. She had always wanted to be a lawyer at a very young age, say about 3rd grade. Her godmother was a judge, and one of her cousins by marriage was also a judge. So she wanted to one day be like them. But now on this day, she knew she was going to grow up and be her brother's lawyer and save him. They continued to grow and become even closer as best friends. She went off to the #1 historically Black college and university, Spelman College, an all-women's college in Atlanta, Georgia. He drove down with her and their mom to drop her off because he was so proud of her. She was the first of her siblings to go to college. At Spelman, she really grew into her womanhood and grew in service. Spelman has a motto, a choice to change the world. And it's my understanding that Girl Up has a similar motto, be part of the change. As she was thriving at Spelman and becoming a part of a lifetime sisterhood, her brother fell ill. Nobody in her family wanted to admit that Jeffrey had HIV/AIDS, but she knew. She knew. And in her junior year of college, she said goodbye to her brother Jeffrey on March 24th, 1996. He was only 33 years old when he passed, and he meant the world to her as she did to him. So now what? Her dream, her goal, her mission was to be his lawyer and save him. So now what? Girl up, rise up. That's exactly what she did. She continued on her path to becoming a lawyer. The day she buried her brother, she returned back to school against her mother's wishes because she knew if she didn't go back right then and there, she'd never go back. She had just lost her best friend, who was also her brother. She successfully completed her BA in history with honors and a focus on African and African American history, and on time at that. So after graduation, she returned back to Cambridge to be with her family and attended Northeastern University School of Law. Now, as she's struggling through law school, overwhelmed with trying to learn an entire new way of thinking, an entire new way of speaking, an entire new way of writing as a lawyer, and again, she's back in a predominantly white institution after being at a historically Black college. This created a culture of shock and a fear of failing. So it didn't help that during her second year of law school, at the age of 24, she had a baby. Now what? Is this a dream deferred? How does she continue on? Does she continue on with her dream to become a lawyer? She's made it this far. Girl up, rise up. She completed law school with baby in tow, walked with her class, and completed her last co-op right after graduation. She took a year off before taking the bar examination, and for those who don't know what that is, When you graduate from law school, unfortunately, you simply just graduate. You then have to take a 2 or 3 day exam, depending on where you want to become a lawyer, and pass that exam to actually become a lawyer. So she took the year to be with her 2-year-old that summer, and then took the bar the following summer, putting her behind those she graduated with by only about a year. And right after she graduated, she also became a single mom like her mom had been. A single mom searching for work to feed not only her, but her baby. She found work here and there. She was planning to study for the bar and take the bar. She eventually took the bar that summer and passed. After passing the bar, she struggled now to find a job as a lawyer, which took some time. But I being her, being this girl that I've been speaking about, girl up, rise up. I made my way to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office as an assistant attorney general in the Consumer Protection Division. I was there for about 8.5 years, where I worked on protecting consumers like all of you, protecting you against fraud, be it telemarketing, telecommunications, housing, mortgage lending, credit counseling, or simply false advertising, and tackling lead in children's toys by going up against Mattel. I then moved into the criminal bureau and prosecuted people scamming the insurance system and those scamming the unemployment system, which right now with COVID is one of the most needed benefits for so many struggling to survive. I was able to move up in management while I was in the criminal side of the office. I had been the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for about 9 years. And so when Attorney General Maura Healey came on board, she was obviously focused on creating an office that speaks to all the people we serve throughout the Commonwealth, by us being able to speak various languages throughout the Commonwealth and represent those communities even more as the people's law firm, because we all know that representation matters. Girl up, rise up. So the Attorney General snatched me up and created the position that I serve in now, which is Chief of Organization Development and Inclusion. In this role, I oversee our hiring practices that I helped develop, which is a process that helps eliminate as much unconscious bias and implicit bias as possible, and focuses on an equitable experience for anyone that applies to our office, from the posting to the application and all the way through the hiring process. I also work on recruitment by speaking at law schools, on panels, and to my favorite groups, the youth and young adults. I also help make sure that we are retaining talented staff, especially our staff from underrepresented communities, marginalized communities. I also help with training on being more of an inclusive environment, one where everyone feels as if they belong and are part of the team and can show up to work as their genuine, authentic self. I also help with racial justice and equity work happening throughout the office. So you can imagine after the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, things got busy, especially during the time of COVID. Girl up, rise up. And so we did what we needed to do. We established what I called open and honest conversations, which I led. My Black colleagues and colleagues of color were hurting. They were hurting. We were hurting and needed to know that our colleagues who we work with every day, have lunch with, laugh with, and share most of our time with were there with us and for us, that we had allies among us. So as an office, we started talking about the most difficult subject to discuss, race and racism. We started reading as an office. I now also facilitate our book club, which is focused on race matters. And we have been reading books by Black and brown people, mostly women. We've read So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Olu, Stamped, the Remix by Jason Reynolds and Dr. Ibram Kendi, a book that I personally believe should be in every school from grade 6 and up. We read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander and How to Be Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi. And currently we are reading An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. We are learning together because, as you know, we know knowledge is power. And we know that a lot of this history, her story, Black American history, also known as simply American history, is not taught throughout a lot of school systems. So as an office, we are educating ourselves, reading, watching podcasts, talking, sharing, and most importantly, listening to those who have forever been under the hold of structural racism in a systemic way, listening and learning. If I tell you experiences have taught me something, that's because I've paid a price. I am a Black woman and I do not have the opportunity to determine whether I've been discriminated because of my race or because of my gender. I experienced racism and sexism at the same time. Girl up, rise up. Can you show slide 1, please, and keep it up until slide 2? As you travel along this journey of transforming yourselves, the community, and the world through the lens of gender equity, and you choose to challenge through advocacy and more, please continue to be mindful of the intersectionality of identities. Girl up, rise up for our transgender girls and women. Commit to being an active bystander. Speak up and speak out. You may be a voice for someone and not even know it. Girl up, rise up for our girls and women in the disability community. Girl up, rise up for our girls and women in our immigrant community. Girl up, rise up for our girls and women in our LGBTQ+ community. Get engaged, civic engagement, community engagement, social engagement. You can switch to slide 2, please, and keep it up until the final poem. Become an ally, or even better, an abolitionist. Abolitionists come from slavery. Abolitionists were folks who were intentionally trying to end slavery and provided opportunities for the enslaved in the so-called free slave. They provided change, which included helping slaves learn how to read, which was prohibited and against the law. Several historically Black colleges and universities were founded by white abolitionists, such as my own. Spelman was founded by 2 white lesbian abolitionists from Massachusetts. Girl up, rise up. Be anti-racist, which means showing up over and over to fight against racist policies, ideas, and actions. Girl up, rise up. Girl up, speak up. Girl up, stand up. Girl up, rise up, and stay there. Maya Angelou. Thank you, Girl Up, and continue to rise.